Business Law Agency Part 1 Definition Concept. By the contract of agency, a person binds himself to render some service, to do or something in representation of or on behalf of another, with consent or authority of the latter. Only services can be object of the contract. It is fiduciary contract because it requires trust and confidence. Capacity of the parties. In order to be a valid contract of agency, the principal and the agent must be capacitated. However, if the agent is incapacitated, a contract entered into by him with third person shall be valid as long as the principal is capacitated. Characteristics of agency. The following are the characteristics of contract of agency. Consensual, perfected by mere consent unless it involves the sale of real property or any interest therein, which requires the authority to be in writing to be valid and enforceable. Bilateral, both parties have obligations to perform. Principal, its existence does not depend upon another. Nominate, it has a name or particular designation under the law. Preparatory, its perfection paves the way for the execution of another contract. Remunatory, the agent is entitled to the payment of compensation unless the contrary has been stipulated. Fundamental principles of agency. The two fundamental principles of agency are: the agent must be acted within the scope of his authority, and the agent must act in behalf of his principal. Any act done by the agent beyond the scope of his authority is unenforceable unless ratified by the principal. If the agent acted in his own name, the principal is not liable unless it involves things belonging to the principal. Example: A is duly authorized agent of P for the sale of parcel of land for 1 million. A bartered the land for Mercedes-Benz of B worth 1.5. The contract of barter between A and B is unenforceable because A acted beyond the scope of the authority given to him. Said contract of barter shall only be valid if P will ratify it. In the above example, if A sold the land to B for 1 million in his own name, P is bound by the contract of sale because the land belongs to him. Kinds of agency. The contract of agency may be express or implied. Implied, if the contract of agency may be implied from acts of the principal, principal's silence, principal's lack of action, and principal's failure to repudiate the agency. Oral, written. It is required if the agent is authorized to sell a real property or any interest therein. Otherwise, the sale will be considered void. Remunatory or onerous, except if the parties agree that the service shall be rendered by the agent gratuitously. General, if it involves all business of the principal. Special, if it involves specific transactions or transactions. Agency couched in general terms comprises acts of administrations, and agency couched in specific terms comprises acts of ownership. How agency is created. Agency may be created as following: by contract, by operation of law, by estoppel, and by ratification. Interpretation of the agent's power. Power to sell means to sell for cash only unless stipulated otherwise or the sale on credit is subsequently ratified. Effects of sale on credit. If not authorized, agent may be required to pay the principal in cash basis, but the agent shall be entitled to all the benefits of the contract. If the sale on credit has been ratified by principal, he shall be bound by the terms of the contract on credit. Excuse me. If authorized to sell on credit, the agent must inform the principal of the sale with a statement of the names of the buyers. Otherwise, the principal may demand payment in cash. Del creder agent or guarantee commission agent is one who gets guarantee commissions in addition to the ordinary commission. The purpose of the guarantee commission is to ensure the payment of the buyer, and if the buyer does not pay, the agent is liable to pay the principal. Power to sell does not include the power to barter, mortgage, or pledge. Power to mortgage does not include the power to sell or secure a second mortgage. Power to compromise does not authorize submission of arbitration. This is so because the principal entrusts the judgment of his agent but may have no confidence on the judgment of third persons. Appointments by agent by letter or telegram. When the principal sent an appointment to the agent through letter or telegram, the agent's silence is not considered an implied acceptance except when acknowledge the receipt of the letter telegram without objection, when he did not reply to the letter telegram entrusting to him a power with respect to a business in which he is habitually engaged. Obligations of the principal. The principal has the following obligations to the agent: to comply with the obligations contracted by the agent within the scope of his authority, to advance the sum necessary for the execution of the agency, to reimburse all the expenses advanced by the agent, to indemnify all the damages incurred by the agent in the execution of the agency, to comply with the obligations contracted by the agent within the scope of his authority. The acts of the agent done within the scope of his authority is considered the acts of the principal, and the latter must comply with the obligation contracted by his agent. To advance the sum necessary of the execution of the agency. Since the agent will carry out the orders of the principal, the latter must provide the agent with money necessary to execute the business of the agency. However, if there is a stipulation that the agent will advance the necessary funds of the execution of the agency, then the agent must advance the necessary funds unless the principal becomes insolvent. To reimburse all the expenses advanced by the agent. If the agent spends his own money for the execution of the agency, it is but just that principal should reimburse the same plus interest computed from the day on which the advance was made. The obligation of the principal cannot be excused by the fact that the business was not successful provided the agent is free from fault or fraud. However, the principal is not liable for the expenses incurred by the agent in the following instances: if the agent acted in contravention of the principal's instructions, unless the principal should wish to avail the benefits derived from the contract, when the expenses were due to the fault of the agent, when the agent incurred those expenses with the knowledge that an unfavorable result will ensue the principal was not aware thereof, when there is stipulation that expenses will be shouldered by the agent or the agent would be allowed only a certain sum, to indemnify the agent for all the damages incurred by him in the execution of the agency. Since the services rendered by the agent is for the benefit of the principal, it is but just that principal indemnify the agent for damages that may have been suffered by the agent in the execution of the agency, provided the agent is free from fault or fraud. Obligations of the agent. The following are the obligations of the agent: to carry out the agency, to finish the business already begun on the death of the principal should delay entail any danger, to act within the scope of his authority, to act in accordance with the principal's instructions, not to carry out the execution of the agency if it would manifestly result in loss or damage of the principal, to advance the necessary funds if stipulated, to give preference to the principal's interest, to render an account of his transaction to the principal, and to act by himself through a substitute, to carry out the agency. Having entered into contract with his principal, the agent must perform when has been agreed upon, otherwise he shall be liable for damages. Should an agent decline an agency or should he withdraw from agency for a justifiable reason, he must exercise the proper diligence in taking care of the goods entrusted to him until such time that the principal should appoint another agent. To finish the business already begun and the death of the principal should delay entail any danger. This is an exception to the rule that the death of the principal extinguishes the agent's authority to continue the agency. The exception is intended to protect the interests of the deceased principal. That is why the continuation of the agency upon the principal's death is necessary only if delay entails any danger to the principal's interest. However, if the heirs of the deceased will direct him to continue the agency, the agent must comply with the orders of the heirs. Authority is the power given to the agent to do a particular act. Hence, the agent must not do any act which is not included expressly or implied within the authority given. An act done beyond the scope of his authority will not bind the principal unless ratified by the latter. He will therefore be liable personally to the third person. Nevertheless, the agent authority is not considered exceeded if it is performed in a manner more advantageously to his principal. For example, A was authorized by P to sell his car on credit for 100,000. A sold the car for 100,000 in cash. A did not exceed the authority given because it is more advantageous to his principal. There are instances, however, when a principal is bound by the act of the agent even if the agent acted beyond the scope of his authority, such as when the principal acts have contributed in deceiving innocent third persons, when the limitations upon the authority given could not have been known by third persons, when the principal has placed in the hands of agent a document signed by him in a blank to act in accordance with the instructions of the principal. Aside from acting within the scope of his authority, the agent must also obey the instructions given by him by the principal. The following are the distinctions between authority and instructions. Authority affects third persons while instructions do not. Authority must be verified by third persons while instructions need not to be verified. Violations of authority makes the acts of agents unenforceable, while instructions do not affect the validity of the agent's acts. Not carry out the executions of the agency if it would manifestly result in damage of the principal. The principal reposes his trust and confidence upon his agent, and the agent in return must protect the interests of his principal. If the execution of the agency will result in loss or damage to his principal, common sense dictates that the agent must not carry out the agency. As a matter of fact, the agent shall not be liable for damages for the non-execution of the agency or for the violation of principal's instructions if the same is more advantageous to the principal. To advance the necessary funds if it is stipulated. The agent must advance the expenses for carrying out the agency if it is stipulated unless the principal becomes insolvent. To give preference to the interests of his principal. Agency is a contract of trust and confidence, and the agent is duty bound to protect the interests of his principal even if he has to sacrifice his own interests. If there is a conflict between the interests of his principal and his own interests, and the agent should prepare his own interests, he shall be liable for damages to his principal. To render an account of his transactions to the principal. The agent is bound to render an account of his transaction and to deliver to the principal whatever he may have received by virtue of the agency, even though it may not be owing to the principal. Any stipulation exempting the agent from his obligation shall be void. To act by himself or through a substitute. An agent may appoint a substitute unless he is expressly prohibited by the principal, but he shall be liable for the acts of his substitute if he is not given the power to appoint. Though given the power, the substitute is not designated by principal and the appointed a notoriously incompetent or insolvent person. Take note that all the acts of substitute appointed against the prohibition of principal shall be void. Liabilities of several agent principals. Several agents appointed by the principal should be jointly liable unless solidarity has been stipulated. If solidarity among the agents has been stipulated, each of the agent is responsible for non-fulfillment of the agency and for the fault of negligence of his fellow agents, except in the latter's case when a fellow agent acted beyond the scope of their authority. A, B, and C are solidary agents of P for the sale of parcel of land. C mortgaged the land to the bank and P suffered damages amounting to 100,000. In this case, A and B are not liable because C acted beyond the scope of their authority. In the absence of stipulation to the contrary, the liability of several principals to an agent appointed by them is joint, except if they bind themselves solidarily or the agent is appointed by them for a common transaction. P, M, and N are co-owners of a parcel of land. They appointed A as their agent to sell land with an agreed commission of 5% of the purchase price. P, M, and N are solidarily liable to A. Hence, A can turn over the proceeds of sale to P, M, or N and demand payment of his commission for any of them.